Hi everyone, I'm Eric Lai from Ophthalmology, one of the social media editors here at BMJ. As we celebrate the 10th anniversary of BMJ Open Ophthalmology, we're looking back at some of the biggest research articles published in our journal that have made a global impact. Today, I'm excited to discuss another one of our top 10 most cited paper, comparison of the Kane formula with existing formulas for intraocular lens power selection by Drs. Benjamin Connell and Jack Kane. This study discusses how the Kane formula provides more accurate postoperative refractive predictions than existing IOL formulas. And I'm happy to be joined by Drs. Ben Connell, who will be sharing his insights on the impact of his publication. So let's dive right in.
What problem did your study address, and what are the key takeaways readers should remember?
This study addressed the problem that at least 3% of patients have an absolute error in their spherical equivalent prediction from cataract surgery of at least 3%. And when you think about it, this figure is actually quite high when you consider that for a patient who wants hemetropia, 3%, so more than 1 in 30 patients, will end up either more than one diopter myopic or hypermetropic, which is going to reduce their distance vision. The second problem that this study addressed is that many of the new formulas that were published were actually tested on the same population that the formula was derived from. And so this artifactually improved the accuracy of these formulas. But then when the formulas were tested in an independent population or a separate population, the results were never as good. So this publication tested the Kane formula on some cases that I provided, and I'd had no role in the development of the Kane formula.
How has your work changed clinical practice, research directions, or thinking in this area since publication?
The Kane formula has changed clinical practice and has now become mainstream in part of the IOL formulas used to predict spherical equivalent error. So to that point, it's now been incorporated into many biometers. So companies such as Alcon, Bausch& Lomb, CSO, Interlight, Mopton, Optohelis, Towards Pi, and Zeiss have all got licenses so that they can use the Kane formula in their biometers.
What unanswered questions remain, and what should researchers or clinicians focus on next?
So we've become very good at predicting spherical equivalent outcome, and we typically use maybe 8 to 10 parameters that are measured on a biometer to predict the refractive outcome. However, in a clinic, we collect all this data. So we have corneal topographers that collect all this data. We have all sorts of other measurements. We have OCTs, and we don't routinely use these measurements in predicting spherical equivalent prediction. So I look at the new advances will be in using data to help guide us in what type of IOL to use. So for many of us, we're a little bit anxious about using lenses that aim to correct some presbyopia, and we're anxious about the possibility of night vision changes and maybe a loss of contrast that will mean that that patient is dissatisfied with an EDOF lens or a trifocal lens. But we don't really have any guidance that's really objective on which patients would like a presbyopia correcting lens and which patients won't. So I think a future advance is objective evidence that helps guide us in which type of IOL to use. We have all this detailed information that guides us on the spherical equivalent power of the intraocular lens to use, but we don't get so much guidance on what type of IOL to use. The other thing we don't collect is we don't collect or utilize the free speech data that we're collecting. So there's so many AI scribes that we're all using these days, and this is collecting free text data, and we don't really use this data in guiding our treatments and our IOL selection. So this is another future advance that we can look forward to.
Why did you choose to publish your work in BMJ Open Ophthalmology? And how was your experience with the peer review process?
Jack and myself looked at the strengths of BMJ Open Ophthalmology. It's a very trustworthy journal. It's very objective. It's got very high academic standards, And this was evidenced by the review process. So when we submitted our article, the feedback we got from the journal editors was very detailed, and they'd clearly read it and given a lot of thought to ensure that the journal standards were maintained. So the feedback they gave us was very detailed and much more than any other journal that we encountered. It's very trustworthy, and we like the fact that the publications are open access, which means that that evidence is disseminated very widely. Our publication was initially rejected by the BJO, and I should also say that there are about 5 or 6 other journals that had rejected this manuscript. So we were pleasantly surprised when it was published, and I think by the number of citations, I think it should have been published. So we were very grateful to BMJ Open Ophthalmology for publishing our manuscript.